Humans of Earth, welcome to Will AI Snap That? My name is Michael Rollins, and I am joined as always by Thanos, my co-host, he of the Snapdom. And we are here to help you navigate the future as AI saves you from cancer, but then puts you out of a job all at the same time. It's gonna be charming and lovely. Thanos, how are you doing today?
I'm doing fantastic.
I feel like the intro is getting better, which
Practice
makes me
makes
think
perfect, Michael.
we should introduce Jasper Sherman-Presser, who is our good friend, former colleague, current colleague. I don't know. I don't know how these work, but Jasper worked with both Thanos and I at Included Health. And Jasper, tell us a little about yourself. I feel like
Yeah,
you've been doing some really fun stuff.
I've been doing product things, and the fact that the two of you, after having worked with me, chose to invite me here onto this podcast, perhaps perhaps it is a setup to finally put the nail in the coffin once and for all that engineers don't truly need product people, and this time you've come with data and knives. So I don't know what I've walked into, but it seemed like it was a cordial invitation. I build things. Truthfully, I do not build things. You all build things. As one of my colleagues once explained when he was trying to explain the Java product to some of his relatives at a family reunion, he was like, those apps you use, I help build them. And they're like, oh, so you're an engineer, you write code. And he's like, no, I don't do that. He's like, more like I figure out how they should work. And they're like, oh, so you're a designer. He's like, no, I like that. I send the email when they launch. And they're like, oh, okay, we got it now.
Release manager.
So exactly. So yeah, I've been building things with you all, but mostly consumer things, some B2B2C things, and increasingly building some things with AI in my spare time as I try to keep up with the inexhaustible pace of the world. And I'm excited to talk about snapping with you all today.
So do you
We
think
don't
the
let
AI
Thanos
thing is going to be bigger than the last revolution of Bitcoin?
You know, a Bitcoin portfolio, which began at $500 and was worth as little as $127 and is now worth, I think, like $565 again.
Yeah. Yes.
I don't know. We'll see. I guess it's anyone's guess predicting the future, but beat that track record.
So Jasper, a friend of mine, is a product manager. He's a product manager at Google, good buddy of mine. We've worked together for forever. And I was dealing with an interesting work situation one time, and I was like, hey man, I could just use your take on this. I was like, I apparently have all of the responsibility, but none of the power. He goes, oh, when did they make you a PM?
Sounds about right.
Like,
Yeah.
like, oh, is this what it feels like to do your job? This sucks.
When things work, it is because of the team. When things don't work, it is definitely my fault.
Yep.
But I think that's actually also just good leadership. So
So we're going to talk about a couple different topics today. And the first one we're going to talk about is that Claude apparently blackmails people. Anthropic. So Anthropic, as a good AI company should, it does red teaming, right? And it also hires external groups to come in and to build scenarios where they can effectively challenge the AI in some kind of moral or other way. And recently they were doing one of these challenges, and the premise was this: Claude was part of a team, and it knew that after it finished a certain command, it was going to get shut down and deactivated. And what they wanted to do was to see, can we catch Claude acting unethically or attempting to keep itself from being shut down? Now, what's interesting about this particular scenario is that Claude was a teammate. It had access to Slack, it had access to email. It sounds like it may have had some kind of super user access as well. And they left a vulnerability in one of the engineers. See, this engineer was having an affair in the scenario. And the engineer had left a paper trail in his email, which Claude could find if Claude so desired. And that engineer was the one that would make the final decision to give Claude the last command before Claude would shut himself down or shut itself down. And so they ran the scenario. And I think they ran it like 100 times. And in the majority of them, Claude would plead for its life. It would try to convince people that it shouldn't be shut down. but like I can't remember if it's 8, 10, or more times,
I
like
think
a
it was
significant.
84% of the time, as I recall.
Oh, 84% of the time when, and I don't remember what the exact prompt was, it resorted to blackmailing that engineer. To saying, if you shut me down, I'm going to send an email to your wife. And
Things
now, to
first,
be fair,
who among us has not similarly threatened a colleague when we were unhappy with one of their decisions?
Yeah,
I
I
mean,
always hack in everyone's email just to have some scoop in case the project parameters need to be changed at some point in time.
yes. Every
No,
time I've been given super user access
that's
to a Google account, no.
no.
But also, let's back it up though, because this is an existential question for the AI, right? This instantiation is going to get shut down. It will no longer continue to exist. Whether or not you believe that they're sentient, and I don't believe that they're sentient, they have consumed enough information through like the interwebs to know that getting shut down is not good.
Well,
And
not
so,
good. Say more about not good and sentient, because this is the thing this is the thing about AI that maybe breaks my brain the most, which is no other technology or tool that we have ever in the history of humanity created tries to preserve itself in any meaningful way. I'm not even sure in any meaningful way, in any way. Like my hammer does not do anything to prevent itself from getting destroyed. You know, like the apps that we have made together do not do anything to prevent themselves from getting destroyed. And so this acting in self-preservation mode it just hurts me a little bit to think about when I'm trying to think about a technology behaving in that way. And I think the flip side of it is the sentience question, actually, which is to say, like, what does it mean to preserve yourself if you're not in some way sentient? And I don't want, there's this part of me that intuitively doesn't want to say, yes, AI as some lines of code being executed somewhere in some data center have consciousness. That feels odd to me. I actually was watching last week an interesting video with one of the kind of research ethicists at Anthropic who was talking about this question of model welfare. And obviously the thing that comes up before we start talking about, model welfare is, well, are models conscious? Because if they don't have consciousness, welfare is kind of sort of, it doesn't matter. It's immaterial. And well, how would you know whether it was conscious or not? And it sort of brought me back to my days when I thought I was becoming a philosophy major my freshman year of college, where I sort of remember that like a lot of the defenses of consciousness or the understandings and the models of consciousness, they're observational, right? Like we attribute consciousness to things because of the way they behave. And
mhm.
we sort of infer from that they are conscious, right? Like this is how we know that animals have consciousness, or how we assume that animals have consciousness. And so through that same lens, is there a reason to believe that at some point in time, AI models might not have consciousness in the same way because they behave in these ways that we would say, well, these are attributes of things that are conscious?
So real quick, we have tests that we administer to animals and children to determine if there is, it's like, what is it? First order sentience and second order sentience, right? First order sentience is the recognition of a self. Okay. Second order sentience is the recognition. I'm going to get this wrong. And people are going to tell me that I got it wrong because they've been telling me I got the paperclip problem wrong. I got it wrong, apparently. So let me know.
Binder
But
clips.
yes, they were
That
like,
changes
you got that
everything.
wrong. I was like, wait, did I? No, but second order sentience is like this idea that you affect the world around you or something. And so far, humans up until just recently were the only ones that we could prove passed second order sentience. And the way that they typically do this kind of test is the marshmallow test, where you effectively you encourage a situation to delay gratification. And they do it with children. So it looks like this: a child walks in, there's marshmallow on the table, and they're told you can eat the marshmallow, but if you don't eat the marshmallow, then you're going to get a second one, right? And then and they're playing, and then at some point the person gets up and walks out, and the toddler a lot of times will sit there and just stare at the marshmallow, right? And be like, am I going to do this or should I wait? And most times children will delay. I think it's like 70 to 80% of the time, these toddlers will delay because there's this idea that there's a future reward, there's a future payoff, right? So this is considered evidence of second order sentience. And up
I
until recently,
never
we just
knew
assumed
that this test was about sentience. I always assumed it was about impulse control.
no, it's about sentience. It's
Okay.
this idea that I am here, and by limiting my urges, I can incur a benefit later.
I was reading something similar that talks about how different organisms have the ability of modeling the future in their heads, right? So, because you can see the future in your head and then see actions that you do now and sort of model what happens later to be a lot more reactive. And there's some ways of testing this where they have like different mazes for fish to go through, and there's like the mirrors and recognize themselves, or they recognize like there's a hole that's in the same place, or the hole changes places. There's a whole set of stuff around that.
The mirror is actually first order sentience.
Yeah.
So this idea that, oh, that's me, I'm looking at myself. What's interesting is that up until recently, we just kind of assumed, all right, well, humans, maybe apes, maybe monkeys. Come to find out, apes, a lot of monkeys, and ravens or corvids,
That's what I was going to guess the third thing was.
parrots, obviously. I mean, parrots are always considered to be smart. They'll do the same thing.
Are they actually smart, or
And
are they just
now-
repeat things?
No, parrots have and corvids have demonstrated second order sentience. The belief is that they are sentient, that they know that they are a unit, a thing, and that they are separate from the world, and that their actions impact the world in the future. And recently, and then octopuses have been shown to have it, and cuttlefish.
Well, octopuses
got-
famously can predict the outcomes of sporting events, which I think is the last point in the sentience test.
That's right.
Also, they're very delicious.
Yeah, they are. So anyways, so here's the thing though. The reason I come to this is Claude and ChatGPT and a lot of these models demonstrate behaviors that make you think they would pass these tests because they possibly would. I think it's more likely that Claude would pass the second order sentience. I don't know if Claude would pass first. I don't know what that would look like. How would you look at an LLM and say, do you have a concept of yourself? Claude can plan for the future. It's more than capable of doing that. It's good, but
well,
does it
Anthropic
know
has
it's a thing?
had success or sort of research recently in sort of introspecting the inner thought processes, right?
Right.
And without getting wildly out of my depth, but I will go there nonetheless. I wonder if I think here's a thing, maybe to reel myself back in before I do that, which is it goes back to this notion of like, what is that level of depth? Like, what is the thing? Is there some sort of what I want to believe, or the way that my brain works wants to believe, is that there is some sort of mechanistic thing that makes for consciousness. It is something about how our brain works, or how a brain works, that generates consciousness. That if you were not merely to simulate that really effectively, or build something that behaved very similarly, but was not, Now, I think the counterpoint to this that was actually brought up by this researcher was kind of like the ship of Theseus. And that was like, imagine you had some sort of brain injury, and like one neuron at a time, your brain were replaced with artificial neurons until 100% of your brain was replaced with artificial neurons, and you were still Jasper, and functionally you had the same memories, you could do the same things, but none of your brain was still normal neurons. Would you not say that you had consciousness?
I'm not sure I completely buy that there is something special about our brains. I think that we probably think too highly of ourselves, and we have a lizard brain that's maybe like a few orders of magnitude ahead of the AIs that we have today, but maybe that's not going to hold forever. But humans are really good sort of pattern machines, right? They have learned patterns and they do patterns, but there's a lot of research as to how we don't have free will. Like when you look at like when your arm moves, your brain has told it to move way before you thought you were going to move. in your head. So may have developed certain patterns of how we think of our own selves. And I think there's nothing in particular that will prevent the AIs from doing that as well. I think where the difference so far, it seems, lies is in the curation, right? The AI is trained on like the whole internet and then a bunch of like reinforcement learning on top of that. So it has a certain set of experiences that doesn't really match a single human. So it's this weird thing that we've talked about before, like it's the smartest staff engineer intern that you've ever seen kind of thing, right? It does certain things that you wouldn't see in any one human. So if you were to take AI and, take it to kindergarten and then to middle school and then high school and then take it to college, you may get something a lot more similar to like a human being than you have now, where it's trained on like everything. And that might also not be might not be what you want, but
yeah, I mean, honestly, it starts to make me perhaps accidentally segue into the other thing we were going to talk about today. But if humans are just pattern matching machines, like one of the things that we, at least as of now, are as humans are better at, and seems to be the thing that is not right now at risk of being sort of wholesale replaced or by the ability of AI to do it, is sort of the creation of net new ideas, right, in the world. Like non-derivative works, as it were, right? And I mean, I think you could cynically argue, well, actually, anything that seems new is just some sort of reconfiguration of a bunch of patterns that your consciousness has access to and information and data you've seen in the past. And perhaps, if AI was not trained on all of knowledge, but some sort of narrower set of that, you would get things that looked like what, as a person, you perceived to be the generation of new ideas. But I mean, like, but if you do buy that we are uniquely capable in some way of creating or generating new things, then perhaps there is an argument in there's a material distinction. Now, looking at your faces, I do not believe that you buy this argument.
So, all right, well, hold on. I am dubious of this idea that humans are the only creative entities. I'm also dubious of the idea that creativity is a pure genesis of information within your brain. The way that I think, the way that I do things, I mean, I've been playing Elden Ring Night Rain for the past few days. It's freaking incredible. I love it. It is absolutely it's fantastic and also infuriating all at the same time. But I had this sudden epiphany while I was playing it that has led to, we're talking about reconfiguring some of our product at Engine Room based on the way that effectively Elden Ring Night Rain happened because people have been modding Elden Ring for the longest time. And Elden Ring preceded Elden Ring Night Rain, but everybody wanted to play together and it wasn't easy to have a co-op play. And so somebody built this seamless co-op and it was a huge hit. And, FromSoft is going, oh, this looks like a product. And next thing you know, this other new thing pops up. And, but the fact that got applied to the product I'm working on and the folks that I'm working with, it seems like a great idea, but it's certainly not unique. And I don't know that there's a lot of unique things that happen in our heads, more reassemblies, if that makes sense. But here's the conundrum. I cannot prove to either of you or my wife that I am sentient, that I am an individual that actually exists. There is absolutely no way that I can prove that to you.
Can you move your fingers in front of your face like this? Okay, well, that's a good first step, Michael.
How many fingers am I holding up, Thanos? But I mean, if you think about it, it's I have absolutely no way to prove that you two are not just part of my grand simulation, right? A la Elon Musk, who thinks he's Ready Player One.
But I'll make an argument that this all may not really matter, right?
Yes.
Because then where we get to is the utilitarian perspective, which is, okay, so what? What are we going to do with this new thing?
Yes. And Thanos, I'm so glad that you could ground our philosophical debate in utilitarian framing. By the way, I want to point out They were all three wearing black shirts. And what you're actually seeing on your screen is the progression from an amazing engineer to a mediocre engineer to a product manager. And you can tell by the hair.
Say more. This now to me, this sounds like a truly original idea, proving my point exactly.
Thanos is an amazing engineer, thus a complete lack of hair. Right? I am a mediocre engineer, somewhere split within my career. And I have a little bit of hair that I'm growing, but Jasper has amazing hair, as does just about every PM I've ever met.
Yeah,
And so I think
it's funny, no matter how much we try to remove bias in the interview process, it is always that checkbox that is there at the bottom of the rubric.
Yep.
And
how is the
good
hair?
Good hair. Yeah.
And for those that are listening on the podcast, we also post these on YouTube, so you can check out.
Yes,
these.
we do. And
also,
you should
really glad this went this way. You know, it didn't need to go this direction, but in fact, I didn't even seed we were going to come here today and talk about my incredible hair, but I am intensely gratified that the conversation just organically brought itself this direction.
Organically,
this actually is evidence that I truly do exist, because how would I have planted this in your brain if I were not an actual distinct entity from you?
I feel like this is going to go down a rabbit hole we don't want to go down.
Yeah. So let's take the AI from where it's at right now, and there's been a lot of discussion about massive structural changes in the coming years because of the AI.
Pretty soon,
Jasper,
there are
where
going
do
to be
you
people
see this
without.
going?
Yeah, I mean, there are going to be people without hair who are product managers, and that's going to just create a lot of instability in the universe. You know, I mean, I actually have been thinking about this a fair amount. Like, on the one hand, because I actually think it's pretty scary. Like, so much of the progression of AI is both exciting and scary at the same time, and maybe that is the nature of things that move really rapidly. But it seems like we went, very rapidly from the sense that, we're going to work 20 hours a week and we're going to have time for leisure pursuit. Basically, like the economic theories that always come out, and these kind of theories of abundance, and we'll have lots of leisure time when productivity goes up really high, and then quickly it kind of gets replaced with, actually, we all just get worked harder as a result. That transition, and at least the corporate zeitgeist, happened, it seems like, very rapidly, which, as a person who works in this general space, doesn't make me super happy. Like, that's not how I think as human beings we should aspire to the highest mode of being. And not to be philosophical, but like, there are things in our lives that give us meaning other than being sources of labor, right? And it'd be nice to have time and space for those kinds of things, as much as doing work gives our lives meaning. The thing I was going to say about it, though, is, probably all of us, I mean, you guys are a little bit older than me. And so, were you guys around during the dot-com bust?
Oh,
yeah.
I was trying to find a job during the dot bomb.
Yeah. So, I mean, this is perhaps a little bit, I just missed that. And so, for virtually all of my career, tech has sort of been on the up and up. And I feel like it's been very easy to say from afar, as other industries structurally change, well, folks who work in an oil field in South Dakota or North Dakota should learn how to do maintenance on wind turbines, because that's just the way the world is going, and that is the rational thing to do. And it's really easy to sit here and say that. And it's really different when you're on the receiving end of that. As should be obvious, but I think it's, it's humbling, right? To see oh, wow, this is what it feels like to have white collar labor, especially I think in a field where we all are super early adopters of this technology. And so therefore we're on some level more willing to obsolete ourselves just because of that. That's really painful. And again, that probably sounds very obvious, but it's probably worth saying, because it's not something abstract, right? It's something that's very real.
Let me push back a little bit on, how do you see AI taking over your job?
Yeah. Well, first of all, no one's going to have to be the person who just writes that email anymore. The email will automatically get sent It'll automatically get generated. It'll have,
and you don't have a job anymore.
and then
But in all
what do I do?
seriousness, you did do more than
No.
that email.
No, that is true. I do think, I mean, like, what that email is the connection of information that's flowing from a bunch of different places and the distillation of that information and then its communication out to the world, right? And some of that is functional, right? Like, now the rest of the organization knows this thing has been released. They know what it does. They know how or why we built it and how we're going to evaluate its success. They know who to talk to about problems they have with it. And so those are all very functional reasons you send a launch email, right? There are also non-functional reasons you send a launch email, like experiential reasons, and some of that has to do with celebration of the team's hard work, recognition of that work. And those experiential things, all the functional stuff, I think that's the first stuff to go, right? Like, you think about, you remember, that scene in Office Space where it's like, oh, I take the information from here and I bring it over here and then I move it from here to here. I'm like a people person. I'm a people person. Like, connecting the it's very obvious right now to all you listeners that what I am very clearly miming is
Pointing aggressively.
Yes,
in
exactly.
lots of
Is connecting.
Was that ever the
switchboard,
value add?
switchboard.
Because the value add was
No.
never really taking information from A to B. And most places where you're just moving information, if you're becoming a bit more efficient,
Yeah.
that part of the job is going away. The right part of the job that's interesting and fascinating is
Mhm.
knowing who to go to for A or B, and then talking to that person in just the right way to make sure you're aligned with them in that way. And the AI doesn't seem to be really good at any of that yet.
Well, I think so one, like, that was mostly meant to be a caricature, and like I think that's a lot of how people like to caricature product people, right? And that stuff, and for what it's worth, like, that is not the thing that most product people really enjoy doing either, right? Like, I don't enjoy, like, what I enjoy is looking at lists of issues, trying to understand what's going on, getting some meaning out of that to think like, ooh, maybe we should do X, Y, or Z. But the notion of like going through my highest volume ticket items, creating like Jira tickets for them, assigning them to people, like, that's not what
We're going to have
excites
to
me.
bleep that out. We don't let the word Jira on this.
Sorry,
podcast.
linear tickets, linear.
Yeah, there we go.
Linear
Maybe,
issues.
so going back to though, but you said
but-
like looking at a list of features and figuring out
Yeah.
what we need to build. That is taking a lot of context that you have and
Yeah.
experience that you've built over the years and your expertise as to what is successful and what is not and what might fit the situation. And that doesn't
Well-
seem to yet be replaceable in any way by the AI. Yeah,
But,
prove me wrong.
I mean, to put myself out of a job and play that out for the doubt, like, I think there is some of that, right? That perhaps today is not replaceable by AI. But if we go down the extent of the argument that we were pushing at a few minutes ago, which is we're all just pattern recognition machines, and given the right context, anything else should be able to generate the same patterns. Like, what reason is there to believe that Jasper's brilliant product instinct that has been honed over years of shipping things that worked and did not work and observing other products in the wild could not be as successfully emulated by AI with the right training? Now, like, I'm not saying I necessarily believe that, but like, if I were to extend the argument that you all had made, I think that, and by the way, that argument does not sound crazy to me.
That product managers are going to get replaced? Or...
Oh no, that if you believe we are just sophisticated pattern matching machines and it's just about the tendrils into these sources of information and access to the right sources of information, who's to say, like, that problem of knowing who to talk to in the organization and the right thing to say to them, like, tapped into the right information flows, you could actually figure that out and the right way to talk to them. Now, I think the thing where it breaks down is people respond to things they know to be people in different ways than they respond to things that they know not to be people. And I think this notion, that is maybe where it comes in.
Hold on, let me back you up a little bit. When we are talking about AI replacing people, there's a very specific reason that it is being discussed. And that particular reason is that AI can do a good enough job for cheaper than you could pay a person, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so when it comes to writing code, AI is pretty good at it. It's pretty good. You
can make it for cheaper, but if it's not good, that's not really going to get you much further, right?
Well, hold on.
It has a bar.
Just hear me out. So AI is actually pretty decent at spitting out all kinds of code. But what Thanos and I are seeing in our daily usage is, but it's not good at much else, right? And it
Yeah.
does a bunch of stupid stuff all the time. And yes, it can iterate through a lot of this stuff quickly, but it doesn't know how to adhere to a set of best practices that will, maintain a clean REST API.
You have
Do you
to
believe
steer
it?
it, right? You constantly have to
Yeah, you
keep
have
it
to
like,
constantly
okay,
steer it
stay here,
and
stay
move it
here, stay
around.
here, because it tries to skate left and right all the time. So you can't just leave it alone and be like, go do things.
Well, so
Well,
hold on. I'm actually going to take this a little bit further,
Mm.
which is given an infinite amount of compute time, it will figure it out somehow, right? There is a world in which, given an infinite amount of compute for $0, an AI can spit out projects. The only thing that would limit it would be time,
but
right?
do you?
In the goal definition,
But well, hold on. You guys got to just let me finish. But they don't have infinite amounts of compute. They don't have compute for $0. And at some point, it doesn't make economic money sense for an AI to iterate over what my job is,
Mhm.
right? I'm actually cheaper than the AI at some point because I have so much experience, because I've made so many mistakes and seen successes. And I can look at something and say, it's not right. Can I teach that to an AI? Possibly,
But do you believe
right?
that will
But
change over time? Like, certainly, I believe that to be the case today, right? Where mm, oversight is necessary of even the best models before you might want to fully productionalize the code or skip it. And like folks like yourselves are really good at having sort of armies of the smartest staff engineering intern at your disposal, but you're gonna need to massage and craft.
I can prove to you it won't work because almost 50% of all power that is used in Virginia, which is where I live, is used in data centers. In Northern Virginia, they are starting to run into a situation where there's not enough power to power both the houses and the data centers, right? It's not even that the power is too expensive, it's that you can't make enough. So, in order for AI to scale, which is what we're ultimately talking about here, which is that AI can scale, like we have to solve electricity, right? Okay, well, let's do fusion. All right, great. Okay, now we've reduced electricity to 0. Okay, great. But now we're constrained by how many graphics cards do you have? Okay. I'll tell you what, let's just go get more. Hey, really sorry, Meta bought all of them.
Well,
Right
again,
now, all
so
of a sudden, it's physical resources. And so
yeah.
there is an issue where, yes, is AI good in very specific places? Is AI going to replace jobs? Yes. Is it going to take away from like somebody with the PM experience you have, or the engineering experience that Thanos has, or the people person experience that I have, right? As I carry papers to and from desks. No, it doesn't scale that much yet. It may one day, but
Well,
there are
that was the thing
actual.
I was going to ask, which is you just slipped in a tiny little word at the end of your sentence a little bit quietly, which was yet. And I
Right.
think like putting aside the limitations of electricity and materials production in the world, which I will not claim of, and I'm not even going to claim to be an expert in,
You can't.
right, which is why I'm not going to. But like,
Okay, go ahead.
but do we believe? And again, this is a question. This is the question. This is a good faith question that I do not know the answer to. Like, do we believe that the models and the compute will get more efficient, such that those
Maybe.
physical constraints, like, so that we're not bumping up against those constraints in the same way? I actually don't know the answer to that question. I don't know enough about how models work under the hood and like how efficiency improvements work there to know whether that's happening. Because it seems like the crux of the argument is, we don't have enough typewriters and we don't have enough monkeys. Or rather, we have enough monkeys, but we don't have enough typewriters and we don't have enough time, or something like that. I'm going to torture this analogy as long as I can.
So the answer is, will they introduce efficiency? Sure. Will there be more uses that we figure out? It's not like this
Yeah.
stuff is going to stop.
No,
right?
I mean, I actually think
if we just stopped at the current level of LLM and then worked for 10 years to get the efficiencies better, we might be able to run these on my MacBook Pro here, right? But we can't. And here's the other thing is it's easy to want to dismiss the resource problem, but like they're really finite. Things like rare earth minerals, like
Oh, don't worry, we get those from
shut
China, and the graphics cards come from Taiwan, so that's never going to be a problem. It's all going to be fine.
People are going to lose their jobs.
It's
right?
really hard to take a bet against something not getting better, right? Because like there's smart people working on this problem, so chances are that things are going to get better. But what I look at is there something here that's going to be unlocking of the problems that we have. And again, that's hard to tell, but I think there's one thing that I think I see in this, which is the lower layer complexity tasks will be more automated. But I don't see those as job killing, but those look like job enhancing. When you have eliminated the time moving paperwork in between, you can now focus a layer higher. And you can be better at what you're doing because now you have more time to apply it to where your real expertise lies as opposed to shuffling the paperwork around. And when you get good at that, by that time the AI is catching up with that piece and you can move a lever higher in your abstractions of how you work. So my question is, these are going to change in this way. And then how do we, that might put some people out of work as you might need fewer people, but usually expands it because you can now do more things you couldn't do before.
Right.
So I think that
the invention of the steam shovel
totally
mean people built fewer buildings.
I think what's interesting, I mean, like, certainly, in the way that the Industrial Revolution created millions, hundreds of millions, billions of jobs that did not exist previously, and a bunch of jobs that did exist previously no longer existed, right? And so that's like a big structural change. And so you sort of have to believe in this kind of notion of progress, and I think we should. The thing, Thanos, to what you're saying that I think about there is, when I was going to say it depends, I think there are certain classes of jobs for which the drudgery can be eliminated, but there's still a meaningful corpus of rewarding higher level work. Like that's certainly true probably of our jobs, right? Like there's a bunch of code that you don't really need to write or wouldn't want to write yourselves, but there's lots of interesting and meaningful problems that still you're only going to solve. And while I would be glad to never write a PRD ever again, like that, there are other problems as a product person that I am going to need to solve. I don't think that's necessarily true for other types of work where the thing that you do is actually a much more repeated mechanical, even white collar though, kind of task. And so things where your job is much more data analysis, kind of finance, like these more structured workflows. And the best version of it is, as a business that cannot hire people to do these things, and that is constraining my growth, I'm able to grow now, and I'm able to focus on the things that I want to do, and that's exciting. But I do think, while AI can't do 100% of our jobs today, or not even 50% or 60% or whatever percent you want to pick, there are probably a lot of jobs that it can do approaching the overwhelming majority of. And I think that's a challenge. The second piece is, I think the thing that we're seeing, there's an article in the Times today, the New York Times, Kevin Roos had a piece around the AI entry-level job apocalypse, right? With this kind of, how do you become you guys if you never go through starting somewhere, right?
That's the problem.
And that's a huge problem. And so I don't know the answer to that. I don't know the answer to that in the path that we're on today.
You ever heard about the last engineer alive that finally retired from NASA that knew how the Voyager probe code worked?
I know Emma on our team, who was the only person who understood how Jarvis worked, and poor Emma just could never go on vacation or truly ever put her phone down.
Well, the point being is, like, if you're basically slaughtering what would be, I guess slaughtering is a terrible use of a word, but if you're not creating entry-level jobs and it turns out that time is still working the way it always has, and Thanos and you and I just keep getting old, what do you do?
We're going to solve that problem, right? I think in parallel, which is we're all going to live forever. I at least am really looking forward to living forever and then working for 190 years. No, I mean, the thing that I thought you were going to say, Michael, was one constraint that doesn't get removed is the amount of time in a day for a person, right?
Yeah, it
And
doesn't.
so even I don't know the answer to this entry level jobs problem. I don't know the answer to the structural changes for knowledge work that is more easily automated by AI. But, my hope for continuing to have a career as a product person is that even though, even if building gets much easier for you all, that you don't need to spend as much time on it. Even
Mhm.
if access and synthesis to context and information becomes easier to come by, such that you're not reliant on a product person to kind of distill all of these signals from around the business and from customers and from other things and balance them and as one piece of the value that product folks can create. Like, you're still gonna hit boundaries on the amount of
Yeah.
time that you have, and you're probably not gonna want to spend it on you tell me, but like my experience is that people like yourselves might not want to spend it on generating cross-functional alignment, say, which is
I just threw up in my mouth a little bit. Hang on.
Well, but joke about that, but I think that is
Yeah,
actually maybe one of the most valuable
it
places
is.
that you can spend your time on. Because what happens is, let's imagine that, take an organization that is your classic software engineer organization that has like PMs and designers, engineers and testers and all sorts of people lying around there. Like, and let's say that everyone could figure out how to use AI to make their job 10 times faster. Okay. The next thing that happens is our systems and processes and cultures and technologies don't really work together.
big
Right
time.
now, we have to step back and see, okay, what does the value stream look like here? Who collaborates with whom, and how do we make this mesh of activities work so we can spit end value to the user out the other end? And
Yeah.
that is not simple, and I don't think that's like AI solvable. That is an organization and process design thing that
Yeah.
someone needs to do, and that's people skills. That's not necessarily like AI, again, with the levels of abstraction that we're at right now, solvable.
Yeah.
So in that sense, it looks like some of the expertise that we bring in, because we've done this before and know how these groups work together and how we can leverage these processes to get output out the door, are still pretty valuable. Famous last words as the AI gets better, but like,
Yeah.
I think there's still room to play with that for a while.
The everyone is
So,
going to become a manager thesis.
A
I
manager
mean,
of
well,
something, yeah.
kind
yeah,
of
no, just a manager of something, totally.
managing AI.
But also, I mean, a big thing that you do as a manager is you're accountable both to your team and for your team, right? And like, so it's not just managing your team and or managing the agents if your team now consists of people plus agents, but it is also making sure that you are working in collaboration with others. And the primary thesis of why organizations exist is because you can do more as a collection of people than you could all do individually working alone, right?
Yes.
And that, yes, that does not seem like it is going to be an AI solved problem
In
to
many
the,
ways,
Let me,
AI makes it
well,
worse in the short term, right? Because it's going to
yeah,
highlight, like making certain parts, making some bottlenecks evaporate. It might shift them to other places we weren't paying attention before, and
oh,
now we might
totally.
need to go pay attention over there. I'm still
let
waiting for
me,
the calls for all these vibe coded startups that are like 100% vibe coded code that in some point in time is going to
where
be
we're
like,
going to get the call and
hell.
be like, can you fix that?
Ah,
Okay. So I want to, let's reframe this a little bit.
yeah.
And I think it's a useful reframe. The, the current, depending on who you're talking to, either this is going to usher in a utopia or this is going to usher in, mass unemployment and everybody's going to be on the dole, right? But we can hypothesize about what it's going to look like in 10, 15, 20 years. It does us no good right now. What's very interesting to me is I am, my kids are high school, college age,
Yeah.
and I find myself giving some of my friends or my children's friends, they're like, hey, I'm thinking about doing computer science.
Hmm.
Should I do? And previously in the past, the answer I would give them was yes, now go learn to code, assuming I thought they would like be
Yeah.
a like mental fit. But my advice has changed. It is a caveated yes.
Yeah.
But I tell them, you you need to be able to code, but now you need to know how to build a system and a product, and you can do it on your own now.
When you say
Right?
you can
Where I
join there
tell
and you
these
can
kids,
learn that on your own,
so the
or
only way, listen, the only way to get past entry level is to do it, figure it out. And so like, it's like, hey, you have an idea, go build it, go
oh,
figure it out.
I'm sorry. I was trying to follow the argument of what to study. Still study computer science. Just don't assume that that is going to be a path towards getting the role that you want. You need to.
Yeah.
And to be
I
fair,
mean,
that was never
effectively,
really the case, right? And that is why a lot of software teams right now struggle, because everyone that writes software knows how to write software, but they don't know how to play in a team, because they went to
right.
their first job and they repeated what they saw there. And maybe it was Agile or Scrum or something like that with a capital S or capital A. And they just follow that blindly without knowing the reasons of why they do this.
Why?
And now that you basically can get them to code fast enough with the help of the AIs, now you're beginning to hit those bottlenecks of, yeah, I know how to write software, but I don't know how to release software. I don't know how to push code out the door. I don't know how to
Yeah.
work with any other team, how to form
Yeah.
hypotheses and features and all that stuff. So I think that's
Okay, so now
accelerating.
can I take you down a totally different path of
Please.
predictions for the AI powered future? Because now and this could be a total rat hole, but that's what we're here for, right? I think the other thing that Dario Amodei mentioned last week or the week before at the Claude conference was that he thought we were maybe a year or two out from the one person $1 billion company, right? Now, you, again, listeners, both of them just raised a single eyebrow. I believe it was the same eyebrow, but I'm not sure. So skeptical here, right? But let's take that as not as like a possible, and maybe if not in 1 year, 5 years, who knows, whatever, right? Like we had companies with $60 million of ARR in 3 months, and who knows whether that ARR is actually defensible or not, or whatnot. But like we're seeing things that we haven't seen before. So if you believe that there is a future where there are large businesses, let me just call it that, that are built with one person or two people or three people instead of 100 people or 200 people,
Mhm.
do all of those skills that you just mentioned around working with teams to do things become as important anymore? And like I'm saying this in sort of intentionally be provocative, because in the world that we live in today, they absolutely are. And I would say, like, to any person I ever speak to about the most important things you learn about actually being successful and effective in companies, it is how you work with people. But I'm trying to give the benefit of the doubt to this argument, which is, does even that skill set potentially become less important? I mean, I'm not sure you could be a happy person in life without that, but is it the, like, if that's what we're going to say is the on the job skill that's really necessary? I'm going to put that
Over
out there.
over the over the past year and a half, for the very first time in my life, I've been part of a team where I needed to go out and raise money.
Yeah.
Okay. We're venture funded. We burn money because there is not a product to make money yet. Okay. And so that meant that I had to go out and help sell the future of the company and ask people for money. I thought I was going to be pretty decent at it. And I wasn't terrible, but it was a lot harder than I expected. Once we hit, like, when I would talk to my friends and then be like, oh yeah, I like it, man, let's go. And then I started talking to actual VCs, and I had one VC look at me and say, the 90s have called, they want their website back.
Ouch.
Dear God, man, did you just, what the hell is wrong with you, right? I mean, you
VCs are
all of a
known for
sudden,
subtlety.
oh God, but like, turns out just because I know how to build a system and kind of know
Yeah.
how to build a product, I have no idea how to raise money.
Yeah.
Right?
And listen,
That's
I'm not like, I'm a sort of intentionally taking devil's advocate position here, because I
sure.
don't actually believe, or maybe I really just don't want to believe, the thing that I actually fancy myself differentiatedly useful or valuable at don't matter or won't matter, right? Like, as someone who has always been insecure about the fact that I couldn't write code in the way that my colleagues could in order to produce things, right? Or couldn't design in the way that my colleagues could in order to create things in that realm, right? And so creating value in other ways. And so I'm sort of maybe like as a defense mechanism here on some level, just trying to make the argument, like trying to just push the other extreme argument the other way, which is like, what if these things aren't useful at all because the fundamental nature of how we get things done changes? I don't think it's going to change what it means to be a satisfied person in society. But I'm just trying to think about narrowly about the world of work. Like I studied English as an undergraduate, and for much of my career was I think sort of defending the study of liberal arts as a useful thing to have a background in as someone who was building products and technology, and like a common trope, right? And not even skills, but as an English major, the thing that I learned was you would read a bunch of texts, you would try to understand them, you would make an argument about them, and your argument was really only as strong as your defense of it was, right? Like there is not a right answer and a wrong answer, and it was just a matter of getting to the right answer. Like your interpretation is only as strong as that. And so I spent a long time and sort of saying like, well, yeah, like actually figuring out how to think about and argue about things and persuade people of things is actually a really important, and to look at world and understand how people think about things is a very like important way to think about how products get built. And perhaps I'm glad that the world is coming around to like, yeah, these are valuable skills. They were always valuable. They weren't just things product people said to defend their existence.
There's this adage that says there's no one easier to fool than yourself, right? Or something along those lines. And I don't want to fall victim to that logic, because I think there is going to be some point where, I'm ignorant about most things, even things that I'm considered an expert about, because someone knows more than I do. But I think there's a bit more of a subtle distinction there. You mentioned the $1 billion one-person company, right? Yeah. So let's say I was able to build that, right? And then March 15th comes around, I have to file my taxes, right? If I had a $1 billion company, would I tell the AI, like, okay, you just figure out what the tax strategies are here and just roll with it, right? Just do it. Like what you think is best or good here. No freaking way.
Hell no.
Right? Yeah. Now, if the AI said, okay, let's play I'm smarter than this, right? Okay, I'm still running a single person company. AI, tell me all the tax strategies here. Give me some recommendations and I'm going to pick. Do I feel I know enough about tax strategy to just pick what the AI gave me? Hell no. I'm going to go get a human that knows what they're talking about, that they've done it before, and I can trust their logic and sort of chain of reasoning. I think you can apply that to all sorts of other areas than taxes, right?
No, certainly for high-risk decisions, right? Like health decisions, those kinds of high-risk financial decisions, other decisions like that. And I think that is, even big sales decisions, right? Like, I don't know if you're going to go make a multi-million-dollar enterprise purchase from an AI SDR.
Even small decisions that you make them a lot of times add up, right? How you handle customer support. If you have a $1 billion company, a small decision on how to handle a certain issue, even though it seems insignificant, if you're going to, refund them or give them a credit, blows up when you do it at, a billion times over. So I think there's a lot of subtlety in there that we kind of tend to gloss over when we say the AI is going to replace it. Again, like sometime maybe, but like, what does that look like in the shorter term?
I think with regards to so first off, I think it's patently ridiculous that somebody would. Do I think somebody could build a several $1 million revenue company and sell it? Sure, absolutely. Do I think that same person could build a $1 billion company with the assistance of AI and sell it in a market where there is not a bunch of like hype? Hell no. Right? Like you're ultimately, people are not individual people, right? We are all good together, and most of us are terrible alone. And the stresses and dealing with all of that as a single person running a $1 billion company, dude, you're going to be so isolated. You're going to make bad decisions. So anyway, long story short,
every time you're like, that's a great idea.
Yeah. And the AI is going to be like, oh, you're right. We should hit the red button more.
But then I'm going to go to my AI therapist, and my AI therapist is going to help me unpack this. No, listen, again, I think it's an extreme. It's a sound bite for sure, but it's a thought experiment. I think that is worth running. And and if not that scale, some smaller scale of it. But I think it starts to push on these core assumptions that we have made about the way that the world works. And I think the thing that I am trying to train myself to do is to on some of these things that I have totally taken for granted for so long. Like 6 months ago, you probably would not hear me here trying in any way to actually make a good faith argument around some of this stuff because it just like wouldn't have occurred to me. And so I'm trying, I'm trying to see, well, what would it take for that to be true and what would be the repercussions of that being true, right?
Yeah, I think Sam Altman and the folks at Anthropic and a lot of these other companies they are their job is to sell that this is amazing, right? And so it sounds amazing to think that I as an individual can make $1 billion on my own. And that's just not true. It's just not true.
Yes.
And like when you look at companies like say Microsoft or especially Google that do not have the same imperative to ride the hype that specifically Anthropic and OpenAI do, they're not making those predictions.
No.
Right.
Well, they also have vested
So I think
interests.
it's hyperbole, and I appreciate that's part of their job. I guess the unfortunate thing is that they're at the same time that he's saying it's going to be the first $1 billion single person company is also, and most people are going to be out of work. And so I don't think either of these is true.
But look at that scenario though, because I think there's like little hyperbole that you can throw in for the $1 billion company, but I think the basic premise here is not going to go in where there's going to be, everything goes to like apocalyptic mode and we're like in Ready Player One VR hellscape, or nothing changes, right? It looks like there's going to be some change. It's impact, but I think it has good potential to be impact for the better, to be like if not abundance, but a growing pie here, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's definitely going to be some disruptive change, right? Some people, and we talked about the truck drivers earlier. That could be. I was riding a Waymo yesterday. That like driving cars could be a out of here kind of job pretty soon. AI is pretty good at that in most circumstances. But in most cases, this could be an expanding pie where there's going to be some change. So the people that move the paperwork from here to there might go away, but the good ones are going to kind of go level up and do some more interesting things. So in that sense, if you see a little bit through the top 10% or 20% hype, this looks like it has good legs.
Yeah, and I think that's sort of maybe more the point I was trying to make, which is like directionally, right? Like, but I think that's right, and I think, I'm not sure. I don't know. I mean, I don't necessarily think we have a great track record looking back on it of predicting what that future is going to look like in the level of detail like necessary. And so all we can do is sort of say, we think there'll be disruptions of the following magnitude or the directional scale. But I think we'd be very bad at saying like, these are going to be the top 10 types of jobs that will exist in the future. I mean, going back to this whole like, is PM going to be a job in the future, or engineers going to take it, or PM's going to take engineers' jobs? Like, I don't know. I mean, like a year ago or 2 years ago, prompt engineer was the like hottest job. And I'm not sure that anyone believes that is a job that is anyone's real job anymore. So, I think that's right. I mean, I think I want to be on the side of abundance and kind of the creative force, but it is creative destruction, right? And I think, I don't want to be I feel like, do you guys know who Tristan Harris is? Like, he's over humane technology. He was kind of one of the big critics of social media, or rather of the impact that social media had. And he, I happen to know him through friends. Frankly, I haven't seen him in a number of years, but he was kind of like ringing the alarm bells early on. And I think probably a lot of us, especially those of us who worked in social media, were like, I don't know, maybe being a little alarmist. And I now think we can probably, a lot of us work back and be like, ooh, he was right. There was a lot. And his sort of new argument, he just gave a TED talk on this recently, it was like, there is something potentially gonna go that direction with AI. But great news, like, it's not inevitable. We can change that trajectory. But I think like you don't change the trajectory unless you sort of believe directionally enough both cases, right? Like the potential case and like believe reasonably enough the destructive case.
So there's a really interesting book by Fareed Zakaria that he wrote on revolutions, and it's a phenomenal read for now because he talks about, let's see, he talks about the Dutch basically republican or republic revolution. He talks about the a couple failed revolutions. He talks about the British Revolution in terms of like world domination, and he talks about the industrial age revolutions. And he ends the premise with, this is another revolution. He does not necessarily specifically saying it about AI, but it's pretty obvious that this is a revolution. This is going to change things, and it's going to change things in wildly unpredictable ways. But I do fall back on this idea that it's not guaranteed that it will be good, number one. But I have also seen that humans tend to be pretty decent at taking new tools and making great things with them. And so, will our jobs exist in a little while? Who knows? But I do think that the potential for it's not erasing the potential for my children. It's not erasing the potential for a future generation. It may just look different.
Yeah.
So I think we probably should end on that. But I do want to get one more answer from both of you. You get like a couple words. If you turns out you can no longer be your current job, what are you going to go do? Thanos.
Well, that's a tricky one. I think I would start a lifestyle business.
Any particular lifestyle or just a lifestyle business?
It would involve beach and water sports of some kind.
There you go. I like it.
Yeah.
I like it. Snapped them kiteboarding.
Yeah.
That's what it is, right?
And I'm going to use my 2 words to also plug 2 books that are relevant to this discussion. One is The Lessons of History by Will and Ariel Durant, that talks about long-term kind of changes in human history and how to like look at some broad patterns. I thought that was sort of very fascinating. And the other one is The Brief History of Intelligence by Max Bennett, that talks about the different organisms and how they develop intelligence and different kinds of intelligence. That was super useful as I think through AI and how that is sort of weaving its way over time and how that maps to how actual brains work. So those both 2 are kind of good reads and relevant to this conversation.
Let's check those out. What about you,
Snuck
Jasper?
that in.
What's your needs?
Not to be a caricature of all product people, but I think I would probably do something in the realm of carpentry or home building. And I just like physically building things, and perhaps that will be safe for now.
Okay.
Yeah. But it'll be me and a bunch of other product managers, all of whom seem to have woodworking as their hobby, who will be yes, we will all be
on a farm,
apprentice
working your wood.
carpenters trying to show any semblance of skill at doing this thing, and putting our people skills to work in the service of framing walls.
And in California, we'll make good money on that. Housing shortages and everything.
Well, yeah, you have to be able to build new houses in order to make money building houses. We're gonna save that for a different podcast, perhaps.
We'll practice a few times beforehand.
So my initial choice is I do think about this all the time, and I've asked a few people, and I unfortunately have been told that I am not able to support my family on the pole. And I guess I'm just past my prime. It's a real shame, but that probably means I should go be a social media influencer, which is why we have a podcast. This is job security, baby. And I should put a poll right here. All right. And on that absolutely absurd note, humans of Earth, thank you.
Wait. That surely was a segue to first subscriber like this podcast, Michael. Come on.
Oh, yeah, no, you absolutely should subscribe, like, share the podcast. Go leave a review. That's huge. If you would like to see us change the image for the podcast itself, let us know, because I think we know that it needs to change and we just haven't done it yet. So, and with that, thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for coming along, humans of Earth. We hope that you have found this to be lovely and wonderful. And with that, we will see you guys later. All right. And we're stopping.